Good evening. It's great to hear themes of, very clear themes, I think, of accountability and for many meetings now, demand for action. I hope it is clear we're not in need of therapists. Mr. Selesnik, you're chief executive. Chief executives execute. So it is time for action. Earlier today, you had sent an email, as several people here alluded to, which frankly was devoid of any substantive steps. And I think it's a testament that this administration and this Board of Education believe they're dealing with a PR issue, which can be strategically communicated away. It cannot. This communication does not stand up to even the most perfunctory analysis, unfortunately. Point one claims the district revised the policy on restraints last spring. Simply untrue. As many stated here, it continues to, in substance, remain the same in that it allows restraints not only for imminent danger, but also for destruction of property, which I know Mr. Rifkin will tell me is the same as imminent danger, but also for the functioning or the orderly functioning of a school, which frankly you can drive a truck through. Considering 34 restraints were applied to one student over roughly 37 school days, please don't insult our intelligence in calling this a last resort approach. As another data point, according to the New York Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, in the 8-year period between 2009 and 2017, unfortunately the most recent data KLSD reported, probably because that's the legal requirement, 71% of physical restraint recipients were students with disabilities. As a reminder, they constitute only 16% of the student body of this district. Over that same time frame, 53% of students that were suspended were students with disabilities. Again, they constitute only 16% of the student body. And we're not talking about the number of instances of these restraints or suspensions, we're talking about just the number of students. Number two talks about, in the superintendent's email, talks about revising the time of notification about application of restraint to parents. This was done back in May after the above mentioned restraints caused an outrage. The fact, by the way, that no one is held accountable at all for the morally bankrupt and completely unethical lack of notification to the parents is astounding to me. Because as someone else said before, these methods are continuing to be practiced in the classrooms today, the methods that led to that classroom being out of control. The same people are in place using the same methods, and according to you, everything is great. I do, however, want to pause here and address the issue of seclusion, which you very vibrantly debated me on in the last meeting. Seclusion and restraints, unfortunately, go together often. And I want to be clear that seclusion is defined as the involuntary confinement of an individual in a room or area from which they are physically prevented from leaving. Please note this may not involve any doors or a closed door. A staff member standing in an open doorway is sufficient to create an instance of seclusion if that staff member is preventing the student from leaving a space. And here I want to quote directly from my son's functional behavior analysis report completed by the behaviorist chosen by KLSD. And I quote, "The most frequently occurring consequence to problem behavior is that the student was moved into a separate location. The separate location is defined as a designated break room that is an empty room with padding on the walls, low ceiling, lights, and absent of any other stimuli. This behaviorist went further to conclude that, and I quote again, since the break room is paired with negative behavior, it is recommended that staff begin to engage in some instructional or preferred activities while in the break room." Is this not seclusion? Point three in the superintendent's letter states that staff will receive training. As was said before, we are completely unclear on what this is. While we as a group of advocates have done a lot of research into the types of training that coincide with our children's needs, no input was taken from us, and we are left to wonder regarding the specifics of this training. Teachers go through training all the time. Our budget has a line item dedicated to this. How is this different and addresses specifically the parents' asks? Who is this training by? What is this for? Is this more of the behaviorist philosophy that routinely leads autistic individuals into meltdowns, for which this district then restrains them? At the last meeting, we alluded to this as one of the reasons this special education program is broken. Allow me to give you an example. In the early days of us beginning this advocacy effort, we had a few meetings with Dr. McNulty, Dr. Lee, the psychologist in the middle school, and the middle school self-contained teacher, Mr. Iannarelli. They were all adamant about the fact that self-stimulatory behaviors are not discouraged in the classroom, unless they were injurious. This, however, flew straight in the face of the facts documented again in my son's aforementioned behavioral analysis. And I quote, "When engaged in repetitive movements with his hands, the aide stated, 'calm hands,' and then placed his hands on the table." While this may sound benign, and indeed it is not injurious behavior, this is a way for an autistic individual to self-soothe and self-regulate to avoid precisely the meltdown that eventually follows if you repeatedly deny them the opportunity to engage in these self-stimulatory behaviors. We had a similar experience with calm body demands, which all of the staff denied placing on the children, but that my son's behavioral plan again documented. The staff said to us, the parents, the thing that was most palatable to hear, but clearly in the moment, they did the thing that was most expedient to do. So I ask you, the Board of Education, how do you know you're not getting the same palatable version, which is divorced from the reality of what happens on the ground? So this promise of bringing in consultants, it sounds nice, but we remain perplexed why no feedback from us was sought to identify who these professionals should be. Is this more behaviorist champions whose methods were all the rage 20 years ago? And finally, when you talk about experts that you have, remember that when you go to a Chevy dealership, they will never tell you you should go and buy a Ford. So if you're constantly going back to the experts that were the perpetrators of the situation you find yourself in, are you ever going to hear anything is broken, anything needs to be different, anything needs to be fixed? That is all from me tonight. Thank you.
Do you mind just clarifying a little bit from the letter? There was a question tonight about if the training, the autism specific training, is different from previous training.
I'm sorry, we couldn't hear you.
If it's different from previous trainings, the proposed autism training.
I don't know that I don't want to give the wrong answer, and I don't know I have the answer tonight. What I will say about the training is that there's training that teachers are required to have as training specific to autism. And one of the things we're doing is ensuring that our teaching assistants and our aides, and we did hear them mentioned tonight as such a very important group who work with these students, we're now making sure that they have the same level of training that teachers are required to receive so that they can be well prepared. But beyond that, Alana, I don't want to give a wrong answer.
And then relatedly, you had sort of mentioned that a consultant might be coming in. Is there more information that can be shared about that?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Go back to Adelaide's words. Adelaide said, we can do better. And I agree. We can do better. And we need to do better. And you have all been working very hard to communicate that to us. I said that I wouldn't speak at length because we've also heard tonight that words are not what people want to hear more of. So I'm not going to put out a lot more words tonight, except to say that we can do better and we need to do better.
I heard that from a lot of parents tonight, and I know that there's been some back and forth, but I think it's really imperative that we have the opportunity soon to have a meeting in whatever format it needs to be in between, if it needs to be separate with the administration and the parents that are asking for a meeting, and then with board members or with Marjorie and Julia and members of this community. I think it's really, it's time to have the meeting. And I think you all know my position that this should have happened, and I don't understand why we haven't had this. And I think it's essential to do that. And I think there's a real loss when we don't involve all our stakeholders in discussions, and parents are essential stakeholders in discussions about the education of our children. And I know that everybody on this board is a parent, and we do this because we want to help ensure that the school district is functioning for all children. And the parents here tonight want the same thing. And I think we might need to rethink as a district how we include community input in decision making and allow for opportunities for parent input in a structured way.